Before we get into how the Vikings' most feared warriors built a pain tolerance that bordered on inhuman, let me ask you something you'll almost certainly get wrong. You've heard the phrase, going berserk, but here's the real question. When a Berserkertus took a blade to the body in the middle of a battle, what do you think he actually felt? It wasn't rage, and it wasn't the haze of some potion. Instead, he didn't feel anything. The old Norse sagas say it plainly. These men went into battle, and neither fire nor iron could touch them. Swords opened them up, and they kept killing. Flames licked their skin, and they didn't flinch. For 1,000 years, people called it magic, or madness, or a myth blown out of proportion. But it was none of those things. Because here's what we've forgotten. Pain is supposed to be the one thing you cannot override. Touch a flame, and your hand pulls back before you've even decided to move. That's not a choice. It's wiring. And yet the Berserker had found a way to reach into that wiring and switch it off. On command. Before a fight, through a deliberate, repeatable ritual called the Berserkergang. And the strangest part of all? The off switch they flipped is still inside you, right now. Your body comes with a built-in way to kill its own pain. The Berserkers simply learned the ritual to trigger it, and they trained it for years until they could summon it at will. So how did an ordinary Norse farmer turn himself into a man who felt no pain? Subscribe and stay to the end. Because it wasn't one trick. It was a step-by-step method, each stage building on the last. And the final piece, what happened to these men after the battle ended, is the part that proves the whole thing was real. But first, who were they? The Berserkers were the shock troops of the Viking world. These were men a king sent in first to break an enemy before the lines ever met. And their very name tells you what they were. Berserker, most likely meaning bear shirt, a man who wore the skin of a bear into war. And they did not fight like other men. The sagas describe them arriving at the edge of battle already changing, howling and roaring like animals, biting down on the iron rims of their own shields, shaking, eyes wild, working themselves into something that no longer looked human. Then they hit the enemy line without armor and without fear, killing with a ferocity that broke men before a single blow had landed. Kings prized them. Harald Fairhair, who first united Norway, kept Berserkers as his personal shock troops and bodyguards. To stand across the field from them was, for many, already to have lost. The most famous description comes from the Icelandic writer Snorri Sturluson, set down around 800 years ago. He wrote that these warriors went into battle without mail, mad as dogs or wolves, strong as bears, biting their shields and cutting men down, and that neither fire nor iron could harm them. So how is that possible? How does a man switch off the one thing that's supposed to be impossible to switch off? To answer that, you have to understand the off switch itself. Pain is not really an injury. Pain is a message, a signal fired up your nerves, into your spinal cord, and up to your brain, which reads it and makes it hurt so that you stop, protect yourself, and survive. It runs automatically. You do not get a vote. That is the whole point of it. But your body also carries an override. Soldiers have been shot through and felt nothing until the battle was won. People have walked miles on shattered legs to drag someone else to safety. We have a name for it now: stress-induced analgesia. Under extreme fear or fury, the body floods itself with adrenaline and opioids from the same family of chemistry as morphine, and they clamp down on that pain signal at the spinal cord, slamming the gate shut before the message ever reaches the part of the brain that would make it hurt. It is a survival tool. When a creature is fighting for its life, pain is a distraction it cannot afford, so the body shuts it off until the danger has passed. And here is the thing. For most of us, that override only trips by accident, in a true emergency. The Berserkers built a method to trip it on purpose, and it began long before the first blade was drawn. Step 1 was belief. A Berserker did not think of himself as a man hoping not to get hurt. He believed he became something else, a bear, a wolf, a creature of Odin that steel was not meant to cut. That pelt across his shoulders was basically a transformation. The traditions tell of men who went off into the wild for years to live as their animal, to shed the soft human and come back as the beast. And belief is not nothing. We know now that expectation physically tunes the pain system. What you believe is about to happen changes how much it hurts when it does. Convince the brain deeply enough that this body cannot be hurt, and you have already begun turning the dial down before anything touches you. The Berserker walked onto the field with his pain system half silenced by faith alone. But belief was only the primer. To truly flood the body, they needed the ritual. And this is the heart of the Berserkergang. In the hours before battle, the Berserker went to work on his own nervous system. He chanted. He pounded a rhythm, on the ground, on his shield, with his feet. He howled and roared. He bit down hard on the rim of his shield, and he breathed in fast, heavy, driving gulps. None of this was for show. Every piece of it was doing something. Rhythm and repetition and that hard, fast breathing drag the mind out of its ordinary state and into a kind of trance, a self-hypnosis, the conscious self loosening its grip. And a mind that has stepped outside itself stops feeling the body the way it normally does. Hypnotic and dissociated states are, even today, used to dull pain that would otherwise be unbearable. The sagas describe the body crossing that threshold, the shivering, the chattering teeth, the face swelling and darkening with blood, a great shudder rising through the man until the fury took him whole. That was the trance closing over him. The man was going under. And he almost never went under alone, because step 3 was the pack. Berserkers worked themselves up together, a tight knot of men feeding off one another, each howl answering the last, each shudder spreading to the next, the whole group climbing the same ladder of frenzy at once. We feel this instinctively even now. Arousal is contagious, fear and fury jump from body to body. A crowd amplifies what one man could never reach alone. Together, they drove each other to a pitch of stress no single warrior could have summoned by himself. And all of it, the belief, the trance, the pack, was building toward one biological explosion. Then the battle hit, and the switch was thrown all the way. In that instant, everything the ritual had been priming detonated. The fight or flight response opened to its fullest, a surge of adrenaline, noradrenaline, and cortisol, and the body dumped its own opioids in a flood onto the receptors in the brain and the spinal cord, shutting the gate on pain completely. This is what neither fire nor iron actually was. Not a blade that missed, not skin that could not be cut, a wound that landed and bled and simply never registered because the signal was being blocked before it could become pain. And the same flood did more. Adrenaline strips away fatigue and hands you a burst of raw strength. The focus narrows to a tunnel. The man stops being a man weighing his own survival and becomes, for a few minutes, exactly what he believed he was, an animal that cannot be stopped, killing without hesitation and without feeling. The weapon and the wielder, the same thing, but a switch thrown that hard always comes with a bill, and paying it is the part that proves the whole thing was real. Because the sagas tell us what happened next. When the fury drained away, the berserker was wrecked, weak, feeble, useless, sometimes for days, barely able to lift his own arms. The same men who had been unkillable an hour before now lay spent and helpless. And that is the detail that gives the whole story away as true. You cannot flood a body with that storm of adrenaline and homemade opioids and not pay it back. The reserves are emptied. The painkillers wear off and leave the body raw and hollow. The wounds it ignored suddenly screaming. The energy it burned simply gone. The crash is not a flaw in the legend. It is the exact aftermath modern physiology would predict. It is the receipt for what the Berserker spent, which means the Berserkergang was never sorcery. It was a real, repeatable, brutal piece of biology. So what does that leave us with? It leaves us with this, that the off switch is still in you. You have felt it, even if you never named it. The cut you did not notice until the danger passed. The injury that only started to hurt once you were safe. The wiring the Berserkers learned to command is the same wiring you carry right now. You do not need the pelt, or the god, or the wild years in the forest. But the deeper lesson is theirs, and it is real. Pain is not a fixed wall. It is a signal, and the mind has more say over that signal than we are ever taught. Belief turns the dial. Breath turns the dial. Focus and arousal turn the dial. And what can be turned can be trained. Tolerance built, like a berserker built his, by learning the state and returning to it until it answers when you call. And here is the honest end of it. They were not invincible. The same sagas admit a club could fell a berserker where a sword could not. They bled, and they died like everyone. What they had mastered was never the wound. It was the gap between the wound and the feeling of it. They learned to live for a few terrible minutes inside that gap. The Viking way exists to recover what was lost. If this changed how you think about your own limits the next time pain tells you to stop, remember, it is a signal, not a sentence, and ask who is really giving the order. You already know what to do.